Good morning. Ready or not, here I am. And I hope that you can all hear me. If anybody that is listening now, if you can just give me a little thumbs up or that yes, you can hear me, that'd be great. Had a little computer issues here this morning, which is not unusual for me or anybody else that handles computers and wants them to work in a certain manner. So good morning. Thank you, Nesh, for giving me that thumbs up, and I will start to get started. If you can take a moment to, if you like these programs, to like and share it on your page so that others can actually get access to it and know that, these programs on Star Nations exist. So please go ahead and share and like if you would. That'd be awesome. I'm going to get started. So, the word of the week was desolation. And I was a little hesitant to listen and actually surrender my will of really going to a place that was a little difficult for me, right? But it is about 55 weeks of transforming myself and those that are walking the journey with me through prayer. The transformational prayer. And so I'm talking about desolation. And, desolation is something that is, sometimes, taboo to kind of talk about, right? We talk about other things when we're happy. We certainly, the majority of Facebook hardly ever puts a struggling time, right? And we put a mask on when we're in desolation. I mean, I guess the first thing that I could actually say is, look at Robin Williams. He was probably one of the most public ones that went through desolation, through depression, came out to, because desolation and depression, kind of sometimes walk hand in hand. But he was like one of the most public figures that I got to experience how connected he was to his own emotional pain, his own emotional life history, right? And yet in the beginning when we saw him in Mork and Mindy, he was this very funny, gentle, playful, shy kind of character. And it revealed a lot of who Robin was, that tender, loving, sensitive kind of man. And, through his life and following his career, he lived a very public, it was very, apparent to us, right? He was always in the news or open about things. And he struggled with, depression. And depression is, a piece of the desolation. And we all are subjected to it for whatever triggers desolation within us. We could talk hours and days about what brings us to a place of desolation. So we all have experienced it. Some people can call it, in Catholicism, it's called desolation. In spiritual realms of teachings, it's been known as the dark night of the soul. And, in the medical community or in the practical world, it's also known as a state of depression, isolation. So those kinds of things. And it's so, for me, it's experiencing losing our ability to feel close to God in life, in our faith and in our prayer. Kind of like the doubting Thomas, everybody, like I said, gave doubting Thomas a hard time, but actually it was kind of smart because he actually got to poke Jesus's rib. And so he didn't have to go into a state of desolation. He had that instantaneous gift of knowing the mystical pieces that we can only feel and see with our other senses and not the physical senses, right? So it's very difficult sometimes to really feel connected. The truth of the matter is we are always connected to God, right? It's our thoughts that separate us. So the only thing that can truly separate us from God and the belief that God exists around us is a thought. It's a thought. And it can shut it down, in an instant. And how do those thoughts form? Well, through life experiences, right? When we have great loss, when we have demons that, circumstances of life that live in us. Robin Williams, struggled with a lot of different demons and how he felt about himself. He was, to me, one of the greatest empaths that I could use as an example, because he felt the world so deeply and he was able to make us laugh. He gave me relief many times when he took life situations and made us see the humor in it, see the our human frailty, our human goodness, and that we were perfect in very imperfect ways that we view, through the human conditioning, our imperfections, and to embrace them, right? And it got the best of him, right? So suicide is a product of desolation. And there's many of us that suffer from depression, but there's also, many of us in the world that live it for long periods of time. And so getting in and out of that is, part of balancing. And, obviously, clearly, I'll mention as I go along, if you're feeling that, to make sure that you cover all your bases, your spiritualness, but also the medical piece of it, right? Get some counseling, get some help. It's okay. It's okay to go to someone, because it's not a weakness. It's more about recognizing, and it's a very, it's actually hidden grace and strength to reach out to people in those times, right? To get better understanding. So with that, I, talked about desolation. With Robin Williams, and to remember during this transformational prayer, I'm realizing a pattern that God is showing me, and it's about how the way I'm going to transform my life through prayer and the relationship of God is to embrace proactive ways of thinking, being, feeling, and moving towards. I'm sorry. Here's the garbage man. And she's protecting me. So hopefully she'll calm down. Please. Thank you, Lucky. So anyways, so it's a very reactive way of being, right? A state of being. And so some of the symptoms of desolation is we turn on ourselves, right? And we start to believe the negative and harsh talks that we sometimes slip into on a daily basis, right? We're all prone to that. And also negative thoughts that we're insignificant to the people around us, our loved ones, maybe perhaps where we work, in our career, maybe in humanity, that, we become so overwhelmed with what is happening. And we see that, with the shootings in the schools, how we are politically struggling, how we're struggling as humanity as a whole, how our Mother Earth is struggling. I can go on to all the different things of reasons why. And so I always ask, well, with all that's going on, why aren't we in desolation, right? Why don't we have periods of desolation? So it's a very, we're a product of the human race. And so desolation, comes through this experience here. And it's a challenge spiritually for us to recognize that, yes, this does occur. This is an experience. This is information. And it does happen. but the things that desolation does, it cloaks our GPS system, our God perception system, is what I like to call it. And it drains our energy. And think of desolation as, we have Wi-Fi, right? We can't see it, right? And when we connect to the internet, think of that as how we connect to grace, right? It's through an invisible force. We connect to grace through an invisible force, through prayer and knowing and belief, right? And so, like, say we're our Wi-Fi's down, right? We know the internet exists, but there's that unseen force of the Wi-Fi that is somehow not connecting to our computer, which is maybe our brains, right? And but it still exists. But we're kind of like in desolation, right? Because we can't get on the internet. We can't connect with people. We don't know if they're there. They don't know if we're here. All of those kinds of things. So look at desolation as almost like your Wi-Fi, something within your computer brain is not connecting to the Wi-Fi of prayer or grace, and that it happens to all of us, and none of us escape it. It's part of the human conditioning. It's part of who we are here for the human experience. But to recognize that it is a very reactive state. So we'll feel hopeless, depressed, cut off from our community. So some of the clues to move forward from desolation would be, what are you reacting to? Has there been some hurt? Has there been a sudden loss? Has there been a sudden disappointment, a change in a relationship, a change in your reality? Somehow in your reality has you questioning, and what are you feeling intensely, emotionally, physically, or spiritually? What is challenging you? And could it be a trigger from the past? Could it be, a new health issue, a new change? Like I said, a loss of a loved one, a loss of a relationship, a marriage, a job. It could be anything that triggers us into it, right? You think about, desolation is kind of like a docked boat, right? A ship where it's landlocked. And the purpose of the ship is to sail. But desolation is like that boat being stuck and unable to move and experience the water and experience, its purpose, right? To sail on the water. Or it could be like the fish, right? A fish out of water. You feel dry. You feel like you can barely breathe. You feel like you don't matter. Yes, and Willow's even saying, yes, health issue with a spouse. Yeah, that can make you feel instantly desolation when something comes and changes your world in a moment's notice, right? Of course, that's a huge trigger to come and feel like, that turbulence that removes us from feeling the consolation of God, that peace, that joy, that love, to all of a sudden, boom, I'm in a space and where am I? And what is this? And I'm fearful, right? And I might be overwhelmed. So thank you for, sharing that, Willow, because I'm sure there are many people that, are going through the same thing on some level. If it's not for themselves, a loved one, or worry about a loved one, right? So thank you for sharing that. So it also, desolation cuts us off from our community, or the feeling of community, or that our friends even care, or, and so those are the kind of metaphors, the ship being, landlocked, and the fish out of water, or a bird trapped in the inability, maybe a broken wing, or trapped in, something and unable to fly. So those are kind of the metaphors that I use. Also too, like, you're in that God zone of grace, and you're flying high at that beautiful altitude, and somehow, you hit a downdraft, right? all of a sudden life is just going along perfect. You're in that zone of consolation. You're in the zone of grace. And then there's a downdraft. And then your coordinates get a little wonky, and you dip into desolation. And then you all of a sudden are feeling it, right? Intensely. To know, even when you're in desolation, the field of grace is always around us. It's our thoughts that separate us. It's that deep separation that our mind puts us in, that state. And it's not something to fear, but it is something to respect and know that, that we have to take action, right? We have to become proactive, right? So you realize, that the world works in mysterious ways, and that no one can predict what life was going to bring us, right? But part of consolation is that we welcome all of the experiences, that belief, that trust, and knowing that everything will work out in its own way and in its own time. And desolation, let me just show you some pictures that I kind of look at and think about when I, experience desolation. It's another one. And to realize that, desolation helps us start to question, right? And it doubts, it makes us doubt and question ourselves, question our life, question, what does God really exist in this pain that I'm feeling, in this pain that I still carry from my past? Where is God in all of that? And so desolation is an opportunity to find our way back. Consolation, when we're in that state of consolation and joy, we accept, we acknowledge, we believe, and we make choices and correct our thoughts and correct our coordinates, making it closer towards our true north, and use actions to support that consolation. So when we're in it, it's very easy. But when we're in desolation, we just need to remember what it was like to be in consolation, and use those tools and those thoughts to shift. Because remember, when we first talked, our brain can only hold so many thoughts in our mind. 7 thoughts is the average, 5 is below average, and 9 is a little above. So in between that period of time, if we're holding 9 thoughts or 7 thoughts or 5 thoughts of desolation thoughts, we will stay in there. We will stay there. So what we have to do is kind of like fake it till you make it. But remember the times when we were in consolation and we walked through fire, and we walked through grief, and we walked through hardship. And remember that we were in that darkness, we were in that desolation, but we did make it out, even in those darkest moments when we didn't think we could. And if we can do that, we can move through it, we can transform it, and we can bring it back into balance. But sometimes people find it very difficult, right? It's not always easy. And that's where courage and all my other weeks here, because I'm starting to make my little list of my, there we go, see, of how this is unfolding. And, to get out of, at first I went into doubt. That was probably my first clue that I was going into desolation, to experience that. But, to get out of it, I have to work my way back up. I have to get rid of my excuses. I need to have some sense of surrender. Not surrender to the desolation, but to surrender whatever's keeping me captive, holding me hostage. the thoughts, the fears, the sense of unworthiness, the sense that I don't matter, the sense that what's my purpose here? Any of those kinds of things. Those are the things we have to surrender to, not to the desolation. We have to have courage and wisdom and detach as much as we can from those thoughts. And we have to take pause, and we have to have patience with ourselves when we're going through it, because it can last a little bit. But to remember to use your discernment to get also, help, because being in a state of desolation for a very long time, or even like really, a sudden onset of extreme desolation, it changes our brain physiologically. So sometimes we need help. Sometimes could be just talk therapy, but it could be medication, and it could be temporary. And there's no shame in that. That's a proactive way to help yourself. And to remember that, some people don't like medication, and I'm not promoting medication. I'm not promoting any of that. But what I'm trying to say is be sensible and to balance the spiritual and the physical body. And we are governed by both of them. And desolation does have a physiological effect on our bodies. I experienced it myself. And I know that, I retained fluid. If you go back and you look at the last 2 weeks that I was on, I was experiencing the desolation on those weeks. I was going through that physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And I'm just going to talk about that in a little bit, because sometimes I feel like sharing, there's no shame in sharing. I'm learning that. I might as well just say part of my purpose is share my story. Perhaps it'll make make you feel more normal, make you feel less shameful. And if that's cool, and that gets you out of a place of desolation, with me sharing my story and inspiring you, then it's all worth it, right? I'm not going to worry about that, right? But whatever puts us in desolation, doubt, unworthiness, being overwhelmed, I realized in these past few weeks, there was a lesson. And there was a lesson of light in there. And for so many, you may discover the strength, you may discover how resilient you are as a soul, as a person, as a human being, in this sea of human conditioning. Sometimes you go through this and you realize your purpose, and you embrace the beauty of it. Maybe that you can vary the complexity of it, right? And the complexity of who you are emotionally, physically, mentally, through your expression, right? Perhaps through the dryness, you seek out to reconnect, and then you experience how connected you truly are with one another, right? Because what I'm realizing, the things that I wanted to keep hidden about myself, that I thought I'd be judged for, were the actual things that connected me to people in the world, in humanity. And when I took away those kinds of thoughts, then I was able to deeply see God in everything that I looked at. Within nature, within my community, within my family, with people I didn't even know that were just walking on the street. So it's a beautiful thing, a beautiful gift, when you have the courage to stretch that belief system that you hold inside you that keeps you. I would like to just stop for a minute and read, on Discovering Infinite Grace. I posted a little bit ago. Let me just put this one down. A couple days ago, and it was amazing the responses that this got. But I posted it with a post about Marianne Williamson. A lot of you that enjoy self-help books or spiritual books and follow politics, she's also a politician. But she wrote a very beautiful thing in one of her books. And it was, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve this world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. You are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make and manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in every one of us. Every one of us. And as we let our light shine, we consciously give others permission to do the same. As we become liberated from our own fears, our presence within that automatically liberates others. And then I got like a couple of responses that some people said they don't like to shine, not because they want to shrink because they're intimidating others, but that they're afraid to be judged. Now, people that are intimidated are usually in a state of judgment. So when you look at that and your fear of being judged, take 5 seconds of courageousness and shine, because then you allow this process and you'll liberate the person that's judging you because you decided to go past your fears. Because usually judgments come from fears that we're not enough. And it's a coping mechanism. It's a defensive mechanism. It doesn't serve us, but discernment does, right? And so when we are working with desolation, we are learning how to discern between the spirit of what desolation brings us to and discern the spirit of how to move to consolation and what spirit do we believe. And so that's why I like this little crown girl here. And I have to look at it to really, so my little face is going to be in there. But it's about, sometimes on dark days, I know this is really scary that my face is so close. I think nobody cares and nobody's coming. Then I remember who sent me those thoughts. And then I straighten my crown and I move on with my day and I move on with my truth. Because those thoughts do come from what some people might call the evil one. In spiritual communities, we call it the ego, the one that edges God out, the one that says we're separate from God. And that's where those thoughts come from. And if, we're not going to let those types of discernment of that type of spirit of thought, of energy, its own entity, I guess sort of take up rent in our mind, right? If we only have so much space for thoughts throughout our day, that's not one we want to shoo away, right? And by staying in consolation and being proactive and recognizing when those thoughts come in, don't let the army, get in there, right? And so we have to be good stewards of our spirit, of our physical being, right? And that takes sometimes a lot of work. So sometimes we do need outside help, right? We need maybe a spiritual director or perhaps a counselor or perhaps a vacation, a respite. Perhaps we need to have our story heard. Perhaps we need to be honest when we are expected to be happy when we're not. Tell your story. And be sure you tell your story to those that will hold that sacred space. Know who can do that for you, right? And who won't use that against you. So I want to explain, I had a tiny little experience with desolation. Let's see. Let me just put this one up here. When we replace why is this happening to me with what is it trying to teach me, it will shift everything. It does take a lot of fear away. So I am doing this spiritual exercise. I talked about it before. It's through St. Ignatius. And during, it follows different Bible passages and the story of Jesus. and you do meditation and contemplation. So a few weeks before Easter, we entered the tomb of Lazarus, right? And you could choose, what part you could be and how you put yourself within the story, right? And that's how you contemplated and meditated on that, and you examine, right? And so that's how you spiritually entered into this, rather than just reading it. You became the spiritual connection through prayer within the story. So I took myself and I was in Lazarus' tomb. And I will honestly say, I liked being in there. I liked not having any feeling. I felt great being dead because I was cut off from humanity. I was cut off from all my feelings, my wounds, my hurts, my worries, my insignificance, my every thought and everything that pops into my head. I had a break. And so like other people in the class, they would go and they, had been in the tomb with Lazarus, and I didn't move. And the funny part was illness, virus, right? And I'm freezing. Let's see if we can come back here. And so anyways, this is what happened. I got a virus for 9 days. I stayed in my room because I have my grandbabies here and my other family members. And I was afraid I would be contagious, so I isolated myself. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think it was part of my spiritual story, right? And so I stayed in Lazarus' tomb, and I would go to the classes. And so then by Easter, I'm thinking, well, if I'm doing this, I'm going to rise, to Easter, and I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be joyful. And the next exercise was to go to the Passion, and I couldn't. I didn't know why, didn't care to know why, just knew I wasn't going. And so the spiritual director in the class said to me, you need to. And so she said, take Mary's hand. Pray to Mary, ask her to take your hand, ask her to take you to the Passion. So you don't have to be Christian to understand this. You can look at this in a totally different way because there's a lot of metaphoric and parables. And so when I went to the cross and through the passion of Christ and him and Jesus walking through all the things that he did, it was everything that humanity has thrown at us. It's every emotion that anybody's had. It's been about, betrayal. That's a judgment. About, going against and tipping the tables in the temple to those that were in power to say, hey, you got this all wrong. To being so kind to doubting Thomas, for forgiving Judas for betrayal. Like you have this like superhuman consciousness, right? To transmute everything that we face in the human conditioning, everything that we feel and how we're connected here. The Sacred Heart of Jesus was able to transmute it, right? He just continued on, and he, in the end, was resurrection from it. He was beyond and above the illusion of suffering and all of the other human conditionings. So when I asked, Mary, when I was in meditation, I said, how are you handling your feelings around all this? I don't know how I could ever be a mom, right? Because I can't even stand looking at it now. And part of it was I wanted to stop feeling what I was feeling, because a lot of the things that happened around the Passion were stirring things within me. All kinds of things, right? Everything I possibly could imagine that was contained in me, because everything in me is contained in the whole. So yes, I'm going to feel things. I'm going to feel things in my personal life, but I'm also going to feel the things of humanity when I connect with that. When I connect with nature, I'm going to be angry about how animals are being treated, or how our water supply is. And if I'm connected to those that are sick, and well, I have, things that I have, chronic things. And so all of a sudden, I didn't want to feel any of that, but it's important for me to feel it. But the funny thing is Mary told me that, as a child, you thought it was very important to carry others' pain too. And you never offered it up to Jesus. You just kept carrying it and carrying it and carrying it. And so I was carrying all these crosses, not only mine, but others that, my parents, when I was a kid, wanting everybody to be happy, my brothers and sisters, because I love them. The people I met, the friends I met, the people I worked with, clients, you name it. I carried it all because I didn't know what to do with it. And then, I came codependent. So I got into wanting to make everybody happy. And, I was just spinning out of control. And I could see all this. I was shown all this standing, at the foot of the cross. And she said, you weren't designed to carry all that. That wasn't that's not your purpose. Your purpose is to witness it. And your purpose is to take it and lift it up to Jesus through the Sacred Heart so that it can be transmuted. And just for other souls to be seen for their suffering is a wonderful healing thing. And then give it to Jesus. And I said, but how? And I said, how can I do anything more to Jesus that already hasn't been done? I can't do that. And she said, child, I stand there before faith because I know that my son for this. He was created and designed for this, for all of us. And so I realized, this only came to me like a couple days, because at Easter time, I didn't rise, I was still stuck. And until I really started to confront my own emotions and actually be able to go there and acknowledge them without putting any judgment on any of them, but just feeling them, that helped. Because a lot of times, as children, we bottle things up because we don't want to be an extra burden. We put the masks on. We see the masks that other people put on. Sometimes we have to look away. As adults, we become overwhelmed, all those things. And so now I've decided, I'm going to go through this process, but already things have started lifting. So I hope that story you feel that and seeing that people are feeling that, because I did not scroll down on my messages. So that took me 3 weeks. I was in Desolation for 3 weeks. I was talking to a counselor. I was talking to a spiritual director. I had all my bases covered because I'm never going to ever underestimate or think that I can do this alone. And I was in prayer. And I was living my life. I was cleaning my house. I was cooking my meals. I was loving up people. I was cranky. I was crying. I went the whole gamut. I'm naked in front of y'all today with everything in hopes to realize that, not everybody has the perfect Facebook page, right? I don't share any of my things publicly. But what I'm trying to say is that, the world has gotten to the place of media and socialness and all these kinds of things. We've become indifferent that everything is okay, right? And we know in our heart, how we're being led in the characters that we have, the virtues that are being, brought up into our face of how we're going to move through humanity, or as through America, right? And then we have all this perfection, and that imperfections, we have to become shameful about, right? But it's all an illusion, and it's a phase that we're going through, and we really have to recognize that when we're in desolation, how did we get there? And that comparing ourselves to others that are illusions, we have to go inward, So that's what I did. So I asked, the Mother Mary. And discernment is So what consolation and desolation does is you're working to achieve discernment. It's a part of discernment that we really need to understand what spirit is talking to us. Is it the spirit of desolation, the one that wants to keep us small, quiet, feeling poorly about ourselves, not living our life to our fullest, maybe not accepting what our purpose is, feeling left in shame, overwhelmed, unloved? So that's a form of desolation. So the discernment is, how do we discern between the light of God and the spirit of darkness? And we're learning it. Don't fear it. Respect it. Respect it. Don't ever underestimate it, but respect it. And knowing the difference between desolation and consolation, that comes from an active relationship that we're having with God, right? So consolation directs our focus outside, beyond ourselves, right? And to see the whole picture of things and how we're connected. Let me put this one down. Let me put this little Mother Mary one up. Have faith in small things, because in them is where our strength lies. And that's how I feel like when you're in desolation, and in consolation, we have faith in the smaller things, and we remember we're connected. When we're in consolation, we feel connected to everything in a joyous way, right? And we lift our hearts, easily aware that we are connected to that grace, even in the darkness. It's easy for us. I've hit darkness while I'm in that state of grace, and I've sailed through that with that higher understanding, with that higher love for myself, and not taking it personally, but taking it as a personal challenge as opposed to something that's been done to me. The Akashic records, like I always mention to you, our destiny doesn't happen to us. It happens through us. So all those things that come on our plate, how we choose to move through them, whether it's we gain resiliency, better understanding about humanity, our frailty, love, it teaches us so many things. So consolation helps us, it will inspire and generate new ideas, restores balance and refreshes our inner vision, and shows us where God is active in our lives and how it's guiding us. So that's the difference between desolation and consolation. And, we're human, and, the law of rhythm, we're going to be in and out. It's going to ebb and flow in our lives. And, we all can attest to that, especially the older you get, right? Yes. By talking, we find the support of God has put in our life. Exactly. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. A lot of times we're taught through social media and just human conditioning that, to talk about it is a sense of weakness. We have to stiff up our upper lip, and use a lot of humor. Well, you can see that now in retrospect, Robin Williams was hiding, right? And we could feel it and we could know it. But wouldn't it be wonderful if in a moment he reached out before he made that choice? What would it have changed to have that 5 seconds of courage, 20 seconds of courage, how it could make change? And that's not a judgment. That's just a wish I had for him, a wish that he could know. It's not a judgment. And so anyways, when you're in desolation, tell God first and foremost how you feel. Start incorporating that in your prayer. Seek out companionship, because oftentimes desolation will isolate you. Don't ignore or go back on any decisions that you made in the time of consolation when you were closest to God. When you're in desolation, do not back out of those. You hold firm to those. That will be the very ladder that will pull you out of desolation, is by remembering what those consolation decisions were. Stand still and remember your inner map. It's very rocky, even though it's a very dry, very indifferent type place to be. It's also a very rocky and fearful place, right? So remember that inner map. Remember that inner guidance. Recall the time when you were in consolation, because remember, when we remember that and we use our imagination to remember what it was like when things were good, what are we doing in the brain? We're filling those thoughts. We're pushing those other ones away because new ones are coming in. And we can actually, energy follows thought. Thought then creates form, and then it creates our reality. And we can shift our reality from desolation to consolation. But it's, it takes work. It takes partnership, right, with God and those that are around us and the resources that we have, right? Whether it's medical, spiritual director, however it looks for you. Look for someone who needs your help. That's another thing. Helping someone else out of their own desolation, calling that friend or, how are you today or whatever, can actually help you. Because for me, when I was in desolation, helping others, teaching my classes, even when I was in that state, I was able to sort of compartmentalize that. But helping others and actually teaching my Akashic classes and seeing others experience their selves and their light gave me joy and started to move that energy, that thick energy of desolation, right? And get medical help, right, if needed. And then the 8th one is repeat number 1. So you have to keep at it. You have to keep going down, talking to God, seeking out companionship, however long it takes. I was in it for 3 weeks, and I didn't stop trying not to dig myself out. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the teachings and the faith that I have. But I will say, I always had doubt, and I really wished that, I could poke Jesus to make sure he was really there. But I didn't have that opportunity. I had to find it within myself and my own truth. And when you're in consolation, to strengthen that, you want to tell God how you feel, right? And you still want to thank and have that gratitude and understand that field of grace. And store that moment in your memory to return to that sacred space when things get tough. And you use the energy and experiences that you're feeling with that desolation to create that desire to remain in that state. And, helps you commit to it, right? And it helps you to actually reason more quickly and discern, hey, I'm in a bad state because of my thoughts right now. Let me re-examine them. Let me challenge them. Let me align them with God, my eyes with God's eyes. Let me align my heart in this moment with God's heart. Let me align my will in this moment with God's will. Willow says, it's been a freaking ebb for weeks. Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And we know, being that we are connected with others, that a lot of people are in desolation, and then there's others that are in consolation, right? It's going to always switch and always going to ebb and flow. And I'm sorry you're in the freaking ebb this week too. Welcome to the neighborhood. But we're moving and shaking, and we got a plan. So add this to your, the consolation to your life map, right? And let the surplus of, when you're in that consolation of fuel of things, to do things that you don't like to do, the things that you don't like to do. When you're in that beautiful state of grace of consolation, do the things you don't like to do, use it as that. And use prayer. Listen with a discerning heart when you're praying, right? Don't come from a place of judgment. Desolation comes from a place of judgment. Judging how we feel, judging our life situations, judging, we're supposed to be happy when my life just turned upside down. Then we dip into desolation, because then we are denying what we're feeling. And we can't bring our true feelings to God when we're in the state of denying, because we have to be somehow perfect. And who thought of what that is anyways? Human conditioning, really. We're here to break through that. And so discernment helps us to freely choose what is best for us by aligning our will with God's will, which I kind of talked, even in times when we're in doubt. And ask the Holy Spirit to hover over you crowding out all those voices when we start to recognize we're stepping into desolation. But also to remember, God is really in charge in all of this. We do have our thoughts, we do have our free will, and God is standing right there by, like any parent or any higher source of guidance, to catch us when we fall. And so the quicker we recognize it and the quicker we sort of put our will to learn what's going on here. So whatever puts us in desolation or doubt, creating the unworthiness, the overwhelmedness, there's a lesson of light. And there's so much to discover about our strength, our resiliency, our purpose, our beauty, how complex we are. I did repeat this again. And that's because I feel it's important. And let me put this one to the broadcast. And that's when you replace why this is happening to me with what it's trying to teach me, you'll move energy. It's just going to move energy just by the thought and the way you're formulating that, right? And this is my do list for today. Count my blessings, practice kindness, let go of what I cannot control, listen to my heart, and be productive and remain calm, yet calm. It wouldn't be here if it wasn't talking and pushing forward. Let's see. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't for talking and pushing forward for the love of God and others. And Margaret, remember the love of God and others and self. Self is very important to look at, because when you're in desolation, you'll be looking for yourself to pull yourself out. So it's very important to embrace love of self as well. It's something I had to learn. And so it's not a lecture. It's not, it's a pearl of wisdom that I learned. So just remember that as much as you love God and love your others, please learn and turn that inward as well. That's really important. And remember, that's not a lecture. That's just me having the experience of learning that. And so let me do this one here. And I'll take down this one. Declare that what you're going through is not wrong or right, good or bad, mistake or whatever it is to feed an illusion and not to get the whole picture. That's kind of a good one to think about, right? On my page, Discovering Infinite Grace, you can go and like the page and copy and paste those pictures over to wherever you want to find. And desolation is a reactive state. Already when we're slipping into desolation, this is not a judgment, this is a discernment, we're already in a reactive state, and we are reacting to something that's happened in our lives, a disappointment. Perhaps we feel betrayed, which is not an emotion, it's a judgment. And getting in touch with, or feeling abandoned, that's also a judgment. So getting in touch with those feelings and what's the driving triggers. So desolation is reacting to a lot of those things. It's not a judgment, and it's going to happen to us, people. It's just going to happen because that's what we're here for. And consolation through prayer and finding our way back is a proactive, right? And it's also a maintenance, right? Proactive is also maintaining that so that we're not slipping. And most of our lifetime here, we're spending hiding in that desolation, right? That secret desolation that I feel like, Robin Williams came out and was that persona. And in those moments, he was hiding that he was in desolation. And he was a gift to us. in many ways, right? To embrace our humanness and to laugh at ourselves and all those kinds of things, but to remember not to underestimate that there's more that we need to help us, right? And not to be ashamed to reach out and tell our story and get help. To just be able to discern when we can't do it on our own. There are days when you have the moody blues, right? And you're in and out of them. I mean, I can wake up in the morning with the moody blues and be like, happy-go-lucky, dancing freak with whatever. And I'm not talking about those times. I'm talking about these true dark night of the souls and desolations that we're feeling. And I'm at the top of the hour. And the funny thing is, I was so busy this morning, I did not write a prayer. So I'm going to do something a little risque for me, and that is I'm just going to channel something in. So I'm going to ask the energy of the Blessed Mother and Jesus, one of the greatest transmuters of energy that we have. Through his story, we understand humanity, and we understand how humanity is in with us. Thanks, Margaret. I'm just going to say, I know you know that I'm not lecturing. I just want to make sure people that listen to me for the first time aren't thinking I'm lecturing. I know you know me well enough that you knew I wasn't lecturing you. Thank you for bringing that up. And thank you, Neshi. I'm glad you like the topic. Just like everything at Star Nations, we try to bring things to people that would help us. So anyways, okay. I had a beautiful, oh my goodness, where'd I go? I had a beautiful picture. Let me just find it really quick. Thank you for being so patient with me. I'd like to add that to the broadcast. I'm going to put Jesus down just for a second. So this is what I see as consolation. This is what I see after going through desolation. This picture. And it says, as we stand in the shambles of our brokenness, as if for the first time, the light of God's love shines through, and the shards of our brokenness in a glorious display of splintered light. And that was by Bob Holmes from Contemplating the Flow. And my sister sent me this morning. And usually the day before, I usually talk to her, well, what's your word for the day? And so she'll send me these beautiful things on her way to work, things that she finds. We both love Carolyn Mace, and so she's always on the lookout for those things. So I just wanted to share that with her and give her a shout out, because she's one of those go-to people that I go to and trust in times when I'm struggling. And I'm blessed to have her. So I'm going to put Jesus back up here. So I'm going to start with Holy Spirit, please hover over me. I ask that the Blessed Mother, Mary, take my hand, the divine feminine energy and the divine masculine energy of Jesus, those archetypal energies of love, unconditional love, unity, to walk with me. Help me to release and empty out the data that's in me that's not congruent with who I am and the truth of me, that always has me doubting. Allow God to show me in my mind, in my heart, how I was created. What is my original energy that I was created 4. Clear my mind, my body, my heart, my spirit channels. Bring me back to my true identity, my true purpose, my true story. Jesus saw the worst case of desolation imaginable to man. It's all there within the story. Allow all of my fears and all of this place of desolation to be transmuted through the Sacred Heart, clearing that energy so that I may come out of the tomb just like Lazarus, so I may come back to the glory of God, to the light of God, to the grace of God within my life, allowing me to become part of life again and to live my life without fear. I believe in my powers, and I cease to listen to my self-doubt anymore. Bring me to a place where I have no more fear and that I trust in life. That every event in my life is there for a reason. And I lift my thoughts above doubt, and I allow myself to discover the infinite possibilities of grace that relies in my life and that is opened up before me. And I use my power of creation, my co-creation with God, to positively create a harmonious and magical life in all the situations that are brought forth to me. Amen. Have a wonderful day. I hope that if you're in desolation, that you find your way out. I hope that some of these things help you. If you're in consolation, I hope that this gives you the opportunity to strengthen that within you. And that is my prayer for everyone watching. And God bless. And remember that prayer doesn't change the situation. Prayer changes us and transforms us so that we can change our situations. Have a wonderful morning and day. Bye.